Ready? Okay. It's 6:05, 6:06. March 9th, we'll call to order the Planning Commission for Tocqueville City. And let's see, we should have had Gary doing, or Commissioner Tomsick doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you want to do that for us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any disclosures or declarations of conflicts from the commission members? No? Okay, and how about the agenda? Does anybody see anything that needs to change on it? No?
No.
I'd take a motion for it.
A motion that we approve the agenda as is.
I second.
Okay, motion second, we'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, review of the minutes. Do we need to table these minutes for that? How is that? Since they're not here, okay, so we need a motion to table the minutes because they're not complete yet. Somebody want to make a motion for that?
Oh, I make a motion that we table the approval of the minutes from last meeting. Until they're done,
Okay, until next meeting.
till next meeting.
Okay,
I second that motion.
okay, motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, public forum. This is for anything that's not on the agenda. If anybody would like to address the commissioners or the commission at this time, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Not seeing anybody. Sorry, I had to do that. Okay, we'll move on. Reports from me. There was not very many things that went through the last city council. In fact, I don't think we had anything on there. This month, next week, they're actually going to review the preliminary plot application and settlers junction. So we talked about it at the last work meeting, but it's going to be voted on and discussed, or voted on this coming meeting. So that's all I got from me. Does any other commissioners have any reports?
Gary's on his way.
Gary's on his way. He'll make it for the discussion items, huh? Okay, so that takes us into the business section. The only thing we have are annual renewals for nightly rentals. Okay. So we have one annual renewal for nightly rental permit located at 80 North Toker Boulevard, Marianne Bate. We have an annual renewal of livestock condition use permit located at 124th North Ash Creek Drive. An annual renewal of livestock condition use permit located at 1502 South Cholla Drive, and an annual renewal of a nightly rental permit located at 276 Mount Charm. Annual renewal of a livestock conditional use permit located at 112 North Ash Creek Drive, and an annual renewal of a conditional use permit for a nightly rental located at 1015 South Mulberry Drive. Does anybody have any questions on them? I didn't see, I think I already asked this, but there's no outstanding. Everybody has the business licenses are up to date. No complaints. So if anybody has any questions on them, we can discuss them. If not, I'd take a motion for 1 through 6.
I motion for approval, business items F1 through 6.
I second the motion.
Okay, have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, that takes us to the discussion items. This is your job now. So with this big, huge document, this is going to be my suggestion, and it might help if we have some feedback from Nathan and Darren, but this is the biggest document I've ever seen come through Planning Commission.
It's passive.
So we need to figure,
PDF.
well, not as a code, this is a code. So I don't know how to take down this big of a document in under a year. But I think one of the main things we should maybe do is just try to go through and condense everything out of it that we don't need. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things in there for sure that I think we can get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know if we just read through it and
I read,
discuss.
I
or
read through a bunch of it, but I mean, it's like 40 pages. I
Was there
can't
anything
remember.
that you saw that we needed to change in what you read through?
Mm,
I mean, as far as wording, verbiage. And
I
that
think
kind
what
of
we
thing.
need to do is just put like all the, well, I don't know, this is a massive document for an overlay zone. Everything else that we have for an overlay zone is very small, you know, like, so I don't know if we just put in the approval processes or try to condense them processes to what we need. But I think Darren was actually telling me that one of the cities went from like 400 pages down to 100 pages in code. It took them like 8 months to do it, but they just cleaned everything out.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought with this is that we could take it and narrow down or take out the things that we don't need. For example, number 8, which is the water use plan. As I understand it, that comes from Water Conservancy, so it's not something that we would be required to check up on water rights and those types of
Right,
things,
the
right?
city actually is starting, but we got a water acknowledgement letter. So city of St. George started putting on all of their plats that they are not guaranteed water. If applicants signs that they understand that, and they have to go to the district and get a will serve letter before they build anything. So like say, where this is a resort, that if they're proposing however many acre feet they're gonna need for that, you know, I mean, say it was just a tiny hotel, or something, they need 200. Then they have to go to the district and they sign on the line, and it gets notarized, that the applicant realizes that just because you're approving this preliminary, right, that that's not a guarantee of final approval or water upon final approval. And so they get that from there. So if there's something in there that you feel like, the city doesn't guarantee water anyway, I actually got that water acknowledgement from the city of St. George, and I've been sitting there, and it's perfect, so we just put it right on.
Okay.
I mean, they put a lot of time and effort into it, it's a one-page document. We don't guarantee water anyway, so that's probably appropriate to strike out that whole first do this and then do this. When they do their application, it's part of the application process. It says we don't guarantee
Okay.
water,
All right.
so.
Okay, so I'm sure we can get rid of that, and that's a few pages of this.
Well, and then another thing that I'm seeing, that I've seen as consistent is, so like preliminary, just a preliminary plat approval, or preliminary approval of it. Unlike the rest of our code, it's like one page. This is 5 pages or 6 pages just for a preliminary approval.
Right.
So like if we look at our other code and we have, you know, we have that verbiage that goes through, and then you have a preliminary and a, you know,
Yes,
so
What page are you on that you're talking about?
just on preliminary approval is
Which
1015
is-
E5, page 117, 183. So I don't know if we can just change that format and not destroy the integrity of all the wording that's in there and make it 17. Actually, it's still going.
one of the things that I did like about what I read in this is that it is pretty thorough. It looks
It's
to me
very
like
thorough.
it catches everything, and I think
It
that
does.
when we're talking about resort zoning, that's something we are going to want to maintain some control over.
Remind me again which city this came from?
This was from Midway, Utah.
Midway.
And like I said, the reason I went with it is I know the area, and it's very similar to who we are, trying to
Yeah.
maintain that small town feel and those types of things. And they just recently redid it, so. And I also, it was based on a few, their previous plan. You could go in with a resort zone and then do just apartments. And so that was something I was like, ooh, that's something we want to make sure that we don't allow, so. So it does call out a certain portion of it, or 20% being commercial and not residential and that kind of thing, so.
Well, I was gonna try, like, one of my recommendations was gonna be to try to take it down and, like, you know, let's do the first 2 sections. But the first 2 sections die to the whole document and vice versa, so
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to do that at the same time. Or not do all of it at the same time?
Let's see, condense.
Karen, do you have any idea how we can do this like in an easier format?
What's the format that you have right now? Is Word?
It is in Word, yeah. Mhm.
You just, it almost, you have to go down. Paragraph by paragraph and take out the-
And that
Well, not really. I just had to
condense it, maybe
get it
make
through
it
the
shorter.
process here.
The other thing is
It's a big one.
it doesn't exactly fit what we are as, we just discussed the water use and that kind of thing.
And I'm sure it's conflicting in some places that we'll have to catch and make sure that it doesn't override it.
Right, it,
So when Sterling, I think it used to be Sterling, it's not Sterling anymore, like codified, they should have checked and seen some of the code
Before the-
integrated in the code.
So if it
It's conflicting.
doesn't get there till it goes through approval, then it would have to come back for approval if they find some conflicting thing.
Yeah, but those are kind of minor usually.
Yeah.
That I don't know of any way to, you'd have to do a search on the entire code. And I guess we could do that, do a search, we could search bar on the code and type in, have to think like this and see, and then every time it pops up that word.
and I did that with Tokerville, and I did that with using Ash Creek as opposed to their, sewer and that kind of thing. So some of those things I did. There are a couple things in here that, for example, they have a visual committee, I guess, that looks at plans when we don't have that. So things like that. And I tried to eliminate all that stuff as well, but I did actually see one before I came in here. So
What was the acreage that we put on it?
I changed it. They did have a 2 acre minimum. We were talking no less than 5.
5 acres.
So it's 5 acres on here. One of the things that I looked at and I thought, I don't know if this fits us exactly, and that is what we call out for, on the, let's look at this page. It would be section 1015-4F.
Is that
That's
page
like
one?
the third page. Third
Third
page.
page. Land use plan?
What's that?
I'll mention.
Yeah. Mhm. And now go to F. Let's see, is that what it is? Okay, so we're gonna go to 1015-4 and then F, unless I got my pages messed up here. Yeah. And now down to F. Okay, the land use plan, and just looking at these percentages here, that was, I don't know how, that's something I wanted to discuss, is to say, are we comfortable with this? Is this where we want to be? But no less than 20% of the total gross floor area of the collective structure in the master plan must be designated as commercial. And the reason they put this in here was to keep those apartment complexes from utilizing the resort zone as their zoning. I actually read the arguments for why they put it in there, and they said that the only fight the city had against them doing that was to say that it just wasn't within the nature of the zone, which wasn't strong. So, yeah, I don't know how you feel about that. Any thoughts on?
Well, that's exactly that's what we got to figure out, because on the nightly rental section, we got to figure a way to not let them crazy things happen inside of the resort zone. Same thing using that zone.
And so
Facilitate a different.
in this this land use plan or in the item number 3, it does talk about 25% of it, or 20% required for commercial. Let's see, 20% commercial use, and then it has, and I don't know about, the asterisk stuff either, so. Yeah, retail, and it also says something about liquor and things like that as well.
Cafes, restaurants.
A minimum 30% of gross floor area in the master plan must be designated as hotel rooms or nightly rentals. So that's kind of setting, what you can do as far as nightly rentals go. No more than 10% of gross floor area for residential, on-site staff type stuff or whatever for that residential. So I was kind of like, I have no idea what we would be comfortable with as far as that goes.
You know, a couple of things you could do with master with Jenkins, spa, with the islands, that area out there, plus you've got Green Valley, spa, resort, those types of things. See, I don't know if they have any type of permanent residential living on the side.
Right.
Employees into a facility.
And that's when I read that out. That's kind of what caught me is I said, I don't know if I guess we have to define what we are willing to allow to come into Tokerville to fit.
Do you have a maximum acreage?
I don't.
I was wondering, like where the R, let's say, is 600. Right? And I know they're not resort, but I'm just saying, like,
It'd have to be.
that's what I was just gonna say, that is technically what they're gonna be if they're gonna have hotels and things, right? So I'm just wondering if you have a maximum, there's 600 acres, and they said during the presentation, they're looking at it acquiring an additional 200 acres. So I'm just wondering.
Are we talking about the original 310 acre or is this another
I'm talking about
project?
the R across the Anderson Junction.
Oh,
across the
okay,
freeway.
all right.
That where they propose, the multi-use fields
Okay.
and all of these
Yeah.
things. And so I just know when they came here, they came to city council and did a presentation, and the last one they said they were looking at their facility that they were requesting 600 acres, and they want to add 200 more to that. I'm just wondering if you have a minimum, is there some sort of maximum, or are you just letting it go to limited acreage of that? I mean, I'm just wondering. I'm just thinking of the general plan,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I'm just thinking of the general plan and where that fits, that type of acreage, because that would change the art into
Absolutely.
a resort zone. And so then we've got to start looking at where you can put these things, which we are fine with, whatever. But I'm just saying to make sure you don't end up with somebody who's got 200 acres out on top of Sunset,
Yeah.
or there. But I'm not, I'm just wondering if there's a kind of a maximum that we're looking at before they have to apply for something else.
Well, that's
Yeah.
yeah. So when you look at the general plan, does it even fit this 200 acre resort zone in there? And
General plan just talks more so about commercial. It doesn't talk about resorts.
it talks specifically about sandwich shops and things like that. So these are very small scale compared to what we're discussing now. So I would, at least my interpretation of the general plan does not necessarily allow this type of.
Yeah,
I would agree with you.
so that's why I was wondering if there's gonna be some sort of.
Right,
cap
and
on
so I
this.
think we have to kind of,
If it doesn't-
we have to,
Well,
Currently.
and let's say we do the general plan here next year, and that general plan comes back and says, because that's dictated by the residents who live here, and people don't want that. We need something that we can put the general plan in.
Right.
I worry about that.
that's what I feel like. I do feel,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say, I worry about that as well. The other thing though that I do think we have to take into consideration is you can't get an NPDO unless you have over 100 acres, right? So it's like, what do you do if you have 90 acres? You can't put a hotel on 90 acres. So there's gotta be probably some give
Yeah,
and some take.
Well, and I think also you could possibly do an overlay, a resort zone overlay.
That's what this is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But only,
But only creating for a certain number of people. But I would think that at the same time, I would want to
Well, the thing that we're gonna be fighting back and forth is on the nightly rental. So when, like the condos and things like that, if that comes through and they want it, because this says that, you can do condos or overlay, then, yeah, we just gotta figure a way that we're not destroying
So
both.
what if, my thoughts there was to throw that out there, is it not, created that example for residential only? And it says specifically that, and create a nightly rental for RV only, and you create a nightly rental for that clause. That way it's clear, I would think, I don't know, because you don't want, basically the way the night rental is right now, it was drafted and proposed for a residential area of being no more than two, that sort of thing. And now, when we start going, we got a hotel, they can build a 10-story tiny hotel, but you can only have 2 rooms and that's rid of that. And we've talked about that. So obviously we've got to create something that might be for commercial, residential, and somehow.
I think we can just kind of mesh these two
Right.
discussion items together, because on the nightly rental, me and you had a conversation about creating a nightly rental zone, which in my mind is horrible. Like,
Hurricanes have a little bit of fun with that.
yeah,
We talked about that. There's good things about it. But, a lot of the policing action on those things is kind of a party sometimes. And the police out there really think they're really tough to do it. So, and
one of the big things that I did a tiny bit more research on is the entering a residence. So if a cop comes to enter a residence, it's way different than entering a motel. So how we set up the nightly rental for some of these, so that they can enter a hotel and they can mitigate the problem. And they can do that because they have someone at the front that says, yes, you have permission, but they don't have the owner of a resident, whether it's owned by somebody in Salt Lake or New York or here in Tokerville. They're probably, and if it's a nightly rental is occurring, the person that's giving them the problem is not going to give them permission either, right? So then you got to look for a warrant, and they can't, so the problems that's going on in Hurricane are whole other issues.
And in that instance there, that's just one. The beach at San Hall, that's another resort, recreation resort, and that's very condition in that area. The developers of that have made wider roads, they've made more amenities, different things like that. This other one I'm talking about, it's just everything is squished in a private road, it's small, fire department, ambulance, and that kind of thing. And then they get somebody down to the road for the weekend, it's probably where they're not supposed to be by, and it shuts off the entire road. Different things like that. And it's not like it becomes some big, frat house thing for the weekend, because they do have an actual on-site person
That's where I was
living
going.
there, living in that deal, so, but still, you've got the police, you've got the on-site guy, and you got a half a dozen, teenagers from up north that's using mom and dad's vacation home for the weekend. And he says, if that happens more often than they like.
I guess my question is just, I'm just wondering, and I wasn't here when this started, the very first, back in the day of conversation or whatever, but I guess my question is, why does it, I just need more clarification about why it needs to be an overlay zone. Why can't this just be a permitted use in like commercial? Why can't it just be added to a commercial zone that already exists, like highway commercial?
He gave a really good explanation. I can't remember why, but he said it has to stay in an overlay because you can't create a zone.
I just
I
wonder
can't
why it
remember what
couldn't be
that
an
description was.
additional
We'd have to
use
ask him.
in a zone. You know what I mean? Like, we
Yeah.
already have highway commercial, or we already have.
Right, that
So
allow
that's just
hotels
one
and
thing.
that
I
kind
mean,
of.
I know you're not going to take action on this tonight, but that's one thing I just wanted some clarification, and I can ask Keith on that. But just as we've been doing it, I'm like, the whole goal is to exclude it from someone's neighborhood, just because you own 5 acres and your neighbor owns 10, and suddenly you have a Marriott next door, right? Like, I guess, so my question was just like, how come it's not just being added as, why isn't it just being added as a permitted use in a commercial zone that already exists?
The real reason this came to fruition is because Firelight MPDO. And if you look at the south 300 acres of the Firelight MPDO, we have no zone, no way, we have no way to amend all the things that they want to do
So
inside.
then it makes sense to me if this is a resort zone overlay that's specific to an MPDO, right? But you can only have a resort zone overlay if you are already have an MPDO. Let's say Firelight, right, with 1,750 acres, and they know they want to put commercial, right? And if they want to put commercial there, but there's nothing that says that they can have a hotel, and it's in the center of their, 500 acres, and it's in the center of that, their town center, it makes sense to have a resort zone there. The thing that I just keep going back to is that it just seems like unless it's part of a bigger, either in a commercial, either in a zone that is already commercial, if it's a permitted use and it's part of an already commercial, that would be one thing, fine. Or the other, it would be, the other condition that this would apply to is if you have an MPDO. I mean, you need 100 acres for an MPDO. And other than that, fine if it's 5 acres, but I don't know of a time where the general plan suggests that you should have a resort, even on 5 acres, that's not a commercial zone.
Well,
I'm just trying to think of where in Tokerville.
That's what it's running. We'd have to figure out which
So
zones
it
it's
just seems
applicable
like it
in.
would be kind of like it just seems as I think about the general plan, and that it needs to be an overlay, fine.
One of the-
Or a permitted use already in a zone that exists, like commercial, along
Highway
highway
commercial,
commercial, or as part of the MPDO. If you have an MPDO, you can do hotels and things. So then a resort zone overlay, fine, that makes sense to me, right? But I'm just trying to figure out a place that a resort zone of 5 acres would work outside of anything that's already commercial, unless it's part of an MPDO. It makes sense to me if it's in Firelights, because that was part of their conceptual master plan was hotels.
Well, and also,
But they don't have a zone for it. We don't
It's
have a
also-
zone for it, so it makes sense to me to create a hotel zone where we've already seen a master plan that says we'd like to have some hotels.
I don't think this has anything to do with hotels, truth.
No.
This
Well-
It's
is,
about
you know, it's,
recreation.
it's more, yeah, but also the arc. There's not anything, like if these things are coming to Tokerville, there's nothing that will provide them a path to do it.
Sure, and that's what I'm saying, that's why it's part of like a major development, fine, but I'm just saying, I just need to be careful about that.
So one of the things
Yeah,
that,
person with 5 acres.
one of the things that I looked at in Midway, and they've actually on their general plan, they have resort zoning where this can go on
Yeah,
their
that's-
plan. And to me, that makes sense.
Right.
That's where we say, okay, if we're going to allow these kinds of things, where would we allow these in our community? And here's the map that says now if we, that's in the general plan. And that would be where we would apply
Yeah,
this resort
That's what I
zone.
was wondering, is where you see on that map.
We don't have anything like that right now, so that's
So
something.
if we identify that in our general plan,
Mhm.
that's how those areas we should go.
Yeah,
That's why we
and
need people to come
because
out.
we certainly don't want it on every block of 5 acre lots. So if it's not within that zoning.
I don't know, and food for thought is we might want to say maybe more than 5 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to do that. I was just trying to figure out where we want to be, and that's part of what we needed to discuss. I felt like 2 was way too small. 5
That's
feels
almost
little
just
to
a
me.
big spa or something, right?
Yeah,
If you're gonna allow that.
well, and that's in commercial, exactly. This is a, right.
Yeah, same thing in a hotel. We could fit them in a different thing. This is just for something that's, but it could be that you need something like this for, a set of condos or something that's
Sure.
less
Well-
than 5 acres. Or so the other thing that comes into the nightly rental is that when you have on-site, so let's say the big separation that I found is that you have nightly rentals that, let's say there's a complex of 10 buildings and each one's owned by a different person and they let them run rampant, right? They're on a website, someone books them, someone cleans them, the owners collect the money. So there's that. And then there's the 10 buildings that are administrated by one person or one on-site facility. Then they're going to have way less issues. They're going to have way more control. And so if we do something like that, I think that's a minimum requirement is on-site.
So Evans has two, they have the fat part and then the restaurant.
Is that really what it's called?
It's called.
Well, it used to be called that.
It's called the biggest, what they used to choose the biggest school.
Okay, sorry.
Well, they did, that's what that was.
It was, yes. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Remember the fat Okay, sorry. Sorry, I apologize.
So when we
Anyways.
get to reviewing the general plan, we're gonna have to put something in there, we're gonna have to change zoning in some
We're just
areas.
going to have to identify places that we would
That's
allow
what
it.
I'm saying. I think if we just identify areas, I'm not necessarily opposed to the 5 acres. I think 5 acres is fine. Just gotta identify the areas.
Sorry.
And then that's gonna be public who decides what they want in their
Yes,
town,
but
right?
that's
So
why
this
we
is,
didn't come out as we
right,
reviewed the general
right.
plan. So we're not trying to guess where they would want to resort to. We have to want people to come out.
But I guess the reason I'm bringing up Fitness Ridge and the bar, just the official names of those two, so you can go see what their, how much acres they are, what they're doing. And,
Right.
you know, I have a son that works with them. He could probably do it. Generally,
They can be very nice, no doubt about it. They just have to be in the right.
Mobile is on the other end. The other one's just.
well, I think one of the main differences between just a hotel, motel, that kind of thing, this is also the commercial aspect of that. And so we're saying we want to be able to go recreate somewhere in our town,
Even an amphitheater.
an amphitheater, ball fields, whatever they are, kind of a thing. That's what this is gearing towards. And honestly, it was all, Firelight comes in, they say, this is what we want to do. We're like, oh my goodness, we're not even close to ready for anything like that to even,
We just don't want it, right?
well, and that will be determined by the general plan, I would believe.
Do you think we should redo the general plan before we did this? So if we adopt this and the general plan doesn't allow it, then we just
We've wasted a lot of time.
have nothing there.
Well, I think we can.
I think you could still work on it here. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And at the same time, because I don't know.
I think the general plan, we're starting that in March and that won't be done until October. There are multiple rounds of public hearings in there, for public input, and they surveyed the surrounding towns, like the surrounding towns have an opportunity to get feedback, if you're proposing commercial right on their borders, they have an opportunity to say, hey, here's some feedback or whatever. And so, yeah, there might be some of that. I mean, I think it's great. I think if there's things, if you look at it in the meantime, the things you definitely know you want to eliminate.
Well, I don't want to put it on a back burner and just keep bouncing
Yeah,
back.
I
We either
don't
got to
either.
just move it through
No, I
and
think it can
concentrate
move
the
right-
time
I
or.
think it can move right along with the general plan. Yeah, I don't think we can. I don't know if you want to.
I can take, I have not been able to go through a town, just because of time constraints, but I can connect, so do a meeting with that. And get that on it. Yeah, but, I think that would do that. And I don't want to leave a hurry up and yes vote on this. Because we don't have any application.
No, but it's just such a big document.
But yeah,
Yeah.
well,
But you could at least look for it.
I felt like tonight we were
I
gonna be
think
able to kind of
I
trash
think
a
the
bunch
best
of it.
thing that we can all do is maybe everybody go through and figure out what we can remove. And then I think this would be the easiest thing is everybody makes their own red line version of what we can remove. And we come back in here and have the discussion about removing, whether it's good or bad. and decide if we remove it or not. I think that would be better than trying to figure out what we need. If we can eliminate, if everybody has what, what they want to eliminate, and then with the discussion leading the other way, that might be the best way.
And you might even want to break it up in chunks, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we were talking about that, but the purpose and intent has to do with the last paragraph too. Like, so
Yeah,
it's hard to break that. I just was trying to think of that too, but it's all like a seamless
but
document.
yeah, I'm just saying, maybe everybody read through it, if you just expect to, the
First half or something.
Yeah. It's massive, it's 40 pages, you know.
Should have printed it 2 sides.
I tried, my printer didn't like it. Okay.
Okay, so let's do that. For next meeting, let's see if we can strike out at least the first half. So everybody come back with their things, what they want to remove, what they don't think needs to be applicable. Whether it's a one sentence or if it's covered somewhere else in a zone. I mean, because we can take that one, number 8, out right away if that's in the first 20 pages. Okay. Does that sound good to everybody? Yep. Okay. Let's move to nightly rentals. Can you pull the nightly rentals up on the thing? And then I know everybody doesn't have a copy of the code, and what I would like you to go to is C. So what we've had on the nightly rental, me and Darren ran into an applicant that is really has been trying to push the one structure. So what does it say? It says one structure. Each nightly rental must occur within and under one roof of a dwelling and not in a structure that is temporary. So that's the one line that we have in our code to not allow a casita to be rented. And what the lawyer said, which we had a little legal evaluation of it, is that if you have more than 2 and you have a family that's not your family living in it, then you're having a multifamily zone. So you're creating a multifamily zone so that automatically, that's why it has to be under the roof of one dwelling. But I think we can make this really simple. Like, we can keep that verbiage in there and just say secondary structures are not allowed, right? Would that be?
I would just say that and casitas cannot be built. That cannot be
Secondary structures cannot be used as nightly rentals. Accessory.
And a grandfather, because there are some.
There's
nightly
3 in
rentals now
town
are
that
not under
actually.
the same roof.
There's 3 in town that were approved before this was in place.
And probably, well, I guess that was true, city council usually.
What's that?
This ordinance, because this was kind of done within the last 4 years.
This was done almost exactly 4 years, 2018. So then the next thing that we need to talk, which we talked briefly about, was the RV parks. And what I think we can do is somewhere in here, we can actually just create an exclusions paragraph. So in thinking about the motels, hotels, this resort zone, this is the verbiage that I came up with, is basically just putting, like I said, is somewhere in here, making an exclusion. So the exclusion would be motels, hotels, RV parks, shall be exempt from the nightly rental code. And this is where I've got to clean up the verbiage, because I said in here, no more than 10% of an RV park can be used for permanent or temporary structure nightly rentals. So the 10%, I think that is the other place already over 10%, Settlers Junction. So yeah, if they had to drop a couple of them off or
When
something.
you talk about 10%, is that 10% of the overall acreage? Or we talking about 10%
There you go. That's why we needed 10% of the, units,
Total rental.
rental units. Yep.
Yeah.
10% of the rental units.
Temporary structures, I was here last week, I thought they weren't, they're all like,
Well, they switched halfway through city council. They said they're doing permanent structures now, so.
they do some temporary, they sold these.
Well, what I want to do is that they don't have like, even though they're temporary, so they have the log cabins that are pre-built and they just move them in and they're not attached to the ground. So if they're moving them in, it's kind of like a temporary permanent, you know, so we need to, I don't know if we need to define that better, but
I just worry that the temporary living in tiny house that,
yeah, it could be they can use them, right? So that's what they.
Wasn't that what you guys were saying they were gonna exclude last week?
What we need to do is make sure, like, if we want to, like, so let's say, like I said, if we did 10% of rental units, they can allow some of these to happen if we want, but we need to make it some kind of a limit so that it doesn't turn into a completely overrun RV park with tiny cabins, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only way that 10%, it might be 15%, I don't, whatever the number is, but that was the only way that I could figure out how to not do it.
Is there any limitation on that? Is it, can it be a permanent RV park?
No, there's a limitation for 30 days. They can only do it 30 days, but I don't know how you're gonna police that. I'd say it becomes almost a policing problem.
I just think it's like capital.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Well, also this comes back to, you have somebody that's on site, you have somebody that's administering that nightly rentals. So it kind of comes back to that same discussion as you have a check-in building, same thing for the RVs are checking in and out every night. You have facilities there that are people that are watching over
And we typically like a KOA, the operation of a KOA, where you have a meeting that we check in their staff and they should be able to do that. But because the city's not going to be able to have staff, this is going to be a flat between the big city and staff. Either way, say, okay, which ones came in,
Did you see that text that I sent you with language that showed fitting that into an exception on our nightly rental?
Did you send it?
Oh, I sent it the night we had our
We
meeting.
haven't cleaned up the RVs of how much is getting shared yet too, or they gonna, I mean, you could double your. lot
Now I
size.
put 100 residences because we were discussing
Property, like they're in the acre.
We don't want to do that.
firelight.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's why I used
So, yeah, I think so. So yours says operation,
Operation nightly rental within a planned development or master plan development overlay is exempt from the conditions imposed by this section, which is under nightly rental section. So long as nightly rentals were approved as a permitted use within the specific plan development that exceeds, and then we could add the 10% or those types of things.
well, that's the other thing we got to talk about is an MPDO. So so if we don't want to do that because that would allow, so if you exclude an MPDO, then it's going to say they have free reign to do whatever they want, right?
Well, except for in the MPDO process, and you tell them what they can do specifically in that MPDO. So if they talk about that neighborhood
That
that
neighborhood.
we
you
were
could-
looking at for 10 homes in that whole area, we can approve or deny that.
Yeah.
Right? Under the MPDO.
Well, you could, but that's so much, that document's so massive that it's hard to do. So I think what we should do, let's go back a little bit. Is there any other exclusions besides motel, hotels, RV parks on a commercial level that we think we need to identify? Is there any other problems that we can see that would pop up?
Are you better off doing exclusion or do a definition of what this for and separate?
We need to do an exclusion. Yeah. Because this is for, yeah.
Well, I think, and maybe I misunderstood that, but I could see where the MPDO coming in wanting to do their show homes, and that could be an issue.
Well, so if we go forward, my next portion of it was exactly for that. So there's a request, and there's probably going to be a number of requests for people to do these inside of a residential area as a sells. I don't know, what's the term for it? For
It's their model
model
home
homes and
rentals.
Rentals, so they can enjoy the experience and it's administered by somebody and it still stays in a residential area. So I think we could really easily put some verbiage in there too that, and it also has to come back to acreage or an MPDO that and this was brought forth, it has to be under conditional use permit, which this is anyway. So an MPDO can apply, but we need to put a cap on it because, or a limit or a low limit, because let's say someone comes in and does 20 homes and we want to rent ours out, and then they build it and they don't, they rent it until they sell the next one. And so we need to make a limit somewhere or
That's-
a minimum
so-
number of acreage or a minimum number of developments.
100
100
homes.
homes,
And so that makes the large developer, somebody who's coming in selling a lot of homes, and then they can do that.
They can-
Somebody who comes in and does a little subdivision can't do that.
Yeah, they don't, where it's like 20 homes or 15
Right,
homes.
right.
So we need to put something like that in there, and I thought I'd have it written up, but I never did. I never did get the verbiage exactly what I wanted. Does anybody have any suggestions on that? So I guess we could, let's just say one of the requirements is that you need to have an MPDO, right? So that's a requirement to do the nightly rentals. And another requirement would be how many acre, or how many lots, or
How many residential
units
units,
is it?
or units.
If you're talking about a residential, you'd have you're talking about doing a residential zone.
And so this is just for the model homes. So like, let's say someone wants to rent out, like Brio, Brio has that little model home section right there. And you can come in and they can rent them out for the night. And the thing about these is, the only reason I'm actually okay with that is because they're going to be administered by people that are really paying attention to what's going on. And eventually they're going to go away. They're going to be gone, whether it's 10 years or whatever, they're going to be gone. Someone's going to buy them. They're not going to keep them as model homes forever. And then it'll cease and desist because the MPDO will cease and desist, right? It'll be final and there will be no more of it. So then it turns back into, and whether it's in 20 years or whatever, it turns back into a normal residential neighborhood.
Well, it still has all the restrictions and rules of that MPDO.
Mhm.
So it's still tied to the original application.
So through the MPDO approval, we could say, yes, we'll approve this many homes to be used as nightly.
No, we don't want to put it in
rentals.
the MPDO because then we got to amend that ordinance too.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, we want to.
No, I don't mean it as in the MPDO. I'm saying through the approval process. They say, hey, we want to do this, and we can say, we allow that or we don't allow that.
Well, so the reason we don't allow it is because of the nightly rental code now. So that's what we're
Right.
trying to do is make it to where if we want to allow it, we can.
Right, and so in the exceptions of the nightly rental code, put under the bottom of the exception is MPDO or overlay, master plan overlay or whatever. And the verbiage that I had, and I'll just read it so we can all just
I
dissect
might
it.
have read that wrong.
Operation of nightly rent, okay, so this is exception in nightly rentals. Operation of nightly rental within a planned development or master plan development overlay is exempt from the conditions imposed by this section. So we're talking about the nightly rentals that talked about residences that we currently have. Overlay is exempt from this condition imposed by this section so long as nightly rentals were approved as a permitted use within the specific planned development that exceeds, and then I put 100 residential units. So we can say that it has to be over a certain size.
Where is that you're reading from?
I went home and Googled and figured out what would we word that like and that kind of thing. So.
As you were reading that, it felt like you were saying exempt, and you do as many as you want.
Yeah. It has to be on a conditional use permit too.
That's where,
I don't know that you want
Yeah, I
a
don't
whole
know.
area, just a whole, like, even if it is an MPDO. I don't believe you would want 100 homes renting for a couple of long days.
Well, we could put in here too, so like, let's say 100, development of 100 and less with an MPDO and no more than 5 nightly rentals occur,
Oh,
5 at a time,
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
so we could do, so no more than,
Qualifies
in a
number.
conditional use, don't we have the ability to say you can have 5, but you can't have 10 or that kind of
It has
thing,
to
right?
be reasonable.
Right, and which is a reasonable, which is kind of, we decide what's reasonable that we think, right? So can we not control, so let's say they had 5,000 homes and they bunch of different areas. They might have more than 5 or, whatever, so.
5,000, yeah.
Then they just gotta put one in each area.
But we could say, hey, we'll allow 5 here, we'll allow 10 here, or whatever we would allow. I don't know, just,
Because you're gonna have, inside the MPDO, you're gonna have different subdivision things. There's some
Right.
elements of the MPDO. You're gonna have commercial, you're gonna have residential. If I bought a home in part of the MPDO, and it was basically, and I wanted, I had a mother-in-law's apartment on the back end of it, I could come in and rent that back in that. Under the regular residential.
Yes.
rental. So I guess why are we trying to create the ability for the developer to make a bunch of money on this? I guess is my.
and they're, yeah,
Because if I buy a home, like I say, or I build a home, and I'm seeing the trend go a lot more. I was at a planning meeting a week ago where they started talking about because of the prices of homes and people coming in and buying a home and having a mother-in-law apartment inside that home and renting that out, either a monthly basis or a nightly basis, to make the payment on their house. Because a lot of people can't build a $600,000 house and be able to pay that mortgage every month unless they rent something out to be able to do that. That was one of the, so we're always talking about affordable housing. There really isn't affordable, and if you go rent an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment right now, it's $1,500, $2,000 a month. And that's not affordable for 2 kids that are getting paid $15 an hour at their jobs. It just doesn't happen. So there's, in this workshop / meeting that we had, we explored these different things. But I don't know, and there again, as far as having developers come in and create a nightly rental of so many units.
So what we need to do, hold on, let's just start over. This is where we're gonna start. We have a really good nightly rental code right now, right? And it's for residential only areas. So we need to make some exclusions if we're ever gonna have a hotel, motel, or RV, because we gotta clean up the ownership or the residents, right? So the next thing is what we have to decide is if we even want to proceed down that route. So the first route, or one of the routes, is making nightly rental zones, which I don't think is a great idea at all. And the next part is if we're going to allow these model homes, which they've voiced out very loud that they would love the ability to rent out these for 1 night or 2 nights to people, which is usually, and just so everybody knows, probably going to be in the 55 and older community. And so it's probably not going to be rowdy people, but do we want to even allow this little section? Do we want to try to make an exemption for an MPDO
that's how we
or a
end
sales
up
tax?
with this, yeah.
I know you do. Yeah. The cops are where
If you
you're.
write it though, they can do it in the area. You can't write it in your code that
Right.
only it's only one area.
Firelight
Well-
is asked to
well-
do that?
Yes, so they've
Really?
requested, and so what we're trying to figure out here is if we're going to allow it inside of an MPDO and what exemptions, and if we want to, because it's still in a residential area, right? So we're still saying that motels, hotels, and RV parks are going to have to fit their zone, and they're exempt from it. And the only reason they're really going to be exempt from it is because you're not going to have more than 2 rooms rented out in a motel for, and be a resident and all that kind of stuff.
Why do
So
these have to be an exclusion? Isn't it's a house that was built?
the nightly rental, so you'd have to read the code really good, but the nightly rental only allows a resident, so someone that lives here for more than 6 months, and they can only own 2. They can only rent out two houses.
I've
So
been reading it, I'm not reading it.
no, it's okay. So as far as a motel goes, you just wouldn't be able to. You'd only be able to rent 2 rooms out, and you'd have to live in the motel.
No, I just meant for the model homes, that makes sense, though, 'cause they're not.
So they're not residents. So, and then, so if we want to go down that road, we can try to fill that in. If not, then we just don't put it in.
Yeah, and
We're making an amendment right now. The only reason it was brought up, and it was a request that that was kind of an adamant request. Doesn't mean we have to do it.
Yeah.
So it's over the request from the developer, not necessarily.
And he said, we've got these homes, we want to bring people in and they
Well,
want to stay here tonight.
It kind of came from city council too. It came from Ty a little bit, or one.
If you write it that
one-
way, it'd be like the 100 houses, which is obviously for the new areas being developed. Yeah, you know, for the smaller areas, that would be upset that you're not allowing cities there.
That's why you have to,
Custom coaches for one.
that's why you have to define it as, it has to fall underneath however many rules. So like people that are, people that are doing an MPDO, they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars to do this big master plan community. And I understand the need for them to want to sell them. And like I said, the only reason I'm even remotely okay is that eventually these are going to be residential houses anyway. They're not going to be able to be rentals. But, you know,
So like, I guess if they have, let's say you said 10 homes in that neighborhood community, be that, and then you put a time frame of
Mhm.
that. And then they sell them. But at the same time, we start looking at public safety, let's not go to private roads, because from what I'm understanding from the police and from ambulance, fire, they're having issues with small private roads that have curb and gutter and no sidewalk, or curb and gutter and one sidewalk on one side. There's another element there that, you know, if it's designed or to the city's standards, and they have curb and sidewalk, they have those types of things, you're able to park on the street. Because a lot of private streets, they say, well, you know, there's just no parking on the street, and there's nothing there to stop them from doing that.
No, and I wanted to say that, yes, Firelight is one that, sure, they made a request, but we've got to keep in mind that we have more than one MPO, right? We're being approached by more, we were approached by one yesterday, right? Like, so what I'm saying is, the reason that Firelight asked is because Firelight's here first.
yeah.
I mean,
Someone's gonna
that's
ask for it.
why, it's because they're developing first. It's not like this is some unheard of thing. They have a neighborhood, what we're speaking about specifically, just so everyone's aware, Firelight's request is, they have an active adult community, 55 and older. It has 2 phases that are before us. So far, they have phase 1 and they have phase 2. And those are gonna be about 74 lots. They have a strip right along those, so it's residential, 55 and older. They have a strip that would be phase 3, and that is 9 lots. Those are the lots those are single-family homes. They match the exact same design as everything else in there. The difference is, those people, while they build out the 55 and older, they will use those 9 to have people come stay the night to see if they want to buy one of the homes in their community. As soon as Firelight has their active adult built out, those are no longer any sort of nightly rental. They're sold. They're a single-family home that is sold. That whole neighborhood is residential. So what he's talking about with the exclusion and talking about that for the MPDO, it's not because it's specific to Firelight. I live in Brio in Washington. They did the same thing. I actually bought one of those homes. See what I'm saying? That's not unheard of to do that.
Kind of use that, I do like the idea of restriction on it, so that there is a cap or something. 5 years.
So that's what I'm saying. So I mean, and I don't know that we can do kind of a cap, because who knows what the market does if they do it. That's the risk of approving it, right? Is if the market goes down, that might stay a rental for a long time. None of the others are approved that way, only those 9, right? So I don't know how you limit either the number they do, their number happens to be 9. I don't know what you would do if their number happens to be 15, or if someone else's number happens to be 10. I think Brio's is like 4 or so or something. It's right on the corner. 2 of those sold for the first one, and then now they've got a couple more that they're models, and I don't know how many Brio has now. But what I'm saying is eventually the whole neighborhood goes back to being 55 and older. It's only for that strip of land while they do that. That's why saying as part of an MPDO, where they have a master plan for what this is all going to be, right? That's never going to be anything other than residential. So it's temporary, but I just wanted to be clear that it's like, I think as a lot of things come through and people say, oh, Firelight said this, or Firelight said that, we've got to be really careful. Just because Firelight has brought this to our attention, it's something that does happen in lots of places, for one. And the main reason that we're hearing it from Firelight is because they're here first.
I don't think it's bad to do, I just worry that the numbers that we put into it, maybe doing a percentage of the total house instead of like hard numbers. So that I can notify any developer coming in.
So how many homes is Firelight putting in the 55 and older? in
So
those
far,
first
we
two?
don't know total, so far they've proposed two sections.
Two sections.
Phases, phase 1 and 2, and that's 80, and phase 3 is 9 lots. That's all we've seen, that's what they've approached the city, that's all we've seen.
I think their acreage is like 250 something acres,
Yeah,
at
it's
55 and older. It's pretty big.
So that 100 wouldn't work if you say you have 100 houses.
Right, yeah, I think your idea of a percentage might not be a bad idea. Can't
For
be a
every
percentage.
10 homes, you can have one loan
Mhm.
or something like
Yeah, and I threw 100 in there just because I threw a number. I didn't really care
But
what.
I think it is important to understand that with the MPDOs and the rentals in the residential area, the ultimate goal is not rental.
Yeah.
And that's why that exception, because it is going to be residential, is in the residential nightly rental to say these are exceptions in the MPDO.
that. Well, I was trying to think of, your senior community, because they're gonna have a lot of communities there. So that's probably a way to try to all the model homes in all of the areas. that we-
It's going to be a percentage per neighborhood too, because if you did a percentage on the whole thing and they have 500 down here and 500 up here, then they're littered with them too, so.
Mhm.
So maybe
So-
to have a maximum, so you can have one per disc up to,
If you go up to 10.
It's a lot.
Value of 200, that's.
We're at 7 on the
like
first
if you had a small group, so like you said, the first phase was
74.
74, so
But it's the same thing with any type of development. It can be small, like you're saying, it can be large, but most developers right now, even in this fast times, I don't see anybody doing phases larger than 30 to 40 homes at a time in a phase.
but they put that model home up first, right? So you sell them. So if
Usually.
the model homes up first, you get people buying the lots for building, so.
So does everybody agree that we should try to fit this in the code?
I don't think that is written.
So, Gary, you think we should do it?
But if you
Yeah,
put it
okay.
here, that's like.
It has to be in here
But
because
it's
we're not
like
amending the
it's
other
like
ones.
in the code, written as an exclusion.
Yeah, I don't think it should be in the regular.
The PDO, no.
Yeah, it needs to be able to be.
So-
You can govern and kind of have a little more control over that than you do, because you're doing development agreement with them.
And it doesn't need an exclusion because it doesn't. mean that
That's what I
it's
was
any
talking
other
about
law.
earlier, where I could say you can have 10% of your homes and I can make that agreement with them.
So I'll tell you what, so now I know the direction that we're gonna go on that. I'll create more verbiage and get another draft. I'll get the other stuff in a draft and we'll actually have a draft document to look at next meeting. Okay? For the rest of this. So let's go, does anybody have any more questions about that or comments? So let's go to the mass grading discussion, and Afton is gonna lead this discussion because this is pretty detailed.
Tricky,
No,
Just kidding. So we had a discussion about this in city council. And just kind of what we were actually doing was we were addressing the uniform fee schedule. And in there, our grading fee was $25, right? And so if you want to get a grading permit, it's $25. If you didn't come in and get a grading permit, the penalty was $25. So what I know from private development, that's not really the way it works. Developers pay large fees for grading. They expect to grade their property, it's something they do, right? You've got to grade to develop, you have to move dirt. So that's kind of where that started, is looking into the uniform fee schedule of like, why is this? And there's a calculation. I obviously worked at an engineering firm and I said it a bunch of times, so that when you see an engineer, you know there's math, right? And so when I looked at ours, I was like, where's the math? Where's the calculation? Where's the cubic yards? When you calculate the grading permit fees, they're based off of the code. You want to pull these up, you can see. So they're actually based off of that. And so then we started looking at our ordinance, if you actually go to the calculations. I will get it to you, 1997. So at one point in time, Darren, Joey, and myself, we went to Rosenberg Associates. We met with Rick Rosenberg, who's the mayor for the city of Santa Clara, but he's also a civil engineer. So if you scroll down, this is the way that grading permit fees are typically calculated in other cities. They're based on cubic yards. So if you scroll down just a little bit so you can kind of see both, so right here, if you look, these are the plan review fees. So let's say a developer says that they're gonna come in and they give us plans, they apply to the city and they wanna get their grading permit. There's an actual grading plan fee, right? That's just a base fee. If they come in and say, we wanna move whatever, 100,001 cubic yards, and you'll go to that calculation. So you'll take the base fee and go. So if you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see then they get charged the actual permit fee. So we've got one that's a review fee and one that's an actual permit fee. And so it allows for all of these things. So what happens is the engineers complete, all the drawings and everything, and then they perform the calculation. They cut a check, they come to the city after the applicant, they submit that application for grading to the city and do that. Our code says that currently that you cannot pull a grading permit until you have either final site approval or you have final plat approval. And so it's nearly impossible to get a final plat without moving dirt. So you could bond for the whole thing, you could try to do that, right, to guarantee that you are going to follow through. So on one hand, it's something that developers do. They move dirt to build property, right? I don't know how you can build without moving dirt. But on the other hand, there's always the concern on the cities of what if this person doesn't perform, right? Not all developers are equal. Some will do it, some are fully funded, some have deep pockets, some don't, right? Some have dreams and some have cash. It's just, so what we've been trying to work on is looking at other cities and what they do. There are a couple of different ways that some cities do it. Some do it as mass grading where plans have to be engineered. They have drainage, they have their engineered plans. They come from an engineer. They're not just done at home. They're actually done by an engineer. They have SLIP, which is stormwater prevention, pollution plans. They have, some have drainage studies. So cities require all sorts of different things to consider grading. Some let it happen on the front end, some let it happen at mass grading, some let it happen at preliminary plat, some let it happen at final. So we went through, we had Rick take a look at our ordinance and see, he submitted that. It's been through Pete's review. We've had it looked at by two different attorneys, Keith and then Bruce Jenkins. So that's kind of where we are in the discussion.
So what we have in
It's
the,
kind of as far as
what we have in our SharePoint is we have a red line version that was actually looked at by our current attorney and our conflict counsel. So believe it or not, we have a draft ordinance before we even did anything. First time ever.
Awesome.
We're getting there.
Yeah. So what I would like everybody to do is really read this and get familiar with it. Because we need to make some action on this pretty quick.
And just real quick, this was uploaded in black and white. It actually needs to be uploaded in color because you'll see if you scroll back up, that red where it says zoning administrator, that's actually the red lines.
And mine's in red on the SharePoint.
Yeah, I don't know, that's the clean version. And
Yeah.
so when you go to the red line.
Yeah, look at the red line one
Red
only,
line.
because the red line will show you exactly what's going on.
Yeah, we need to pull up the red line version. Yeah, exactly. So if you go down, yeah, so you'll see, so you're gonna wanna, before you look at the clean version, you're gonna wanna look at this to see what was changed, what was updated. There are, like we said, we had it looked at by two different attorneys, we had it both looked at by Keith, and he worked with Bruce Jenkins too, as far as, just, this is what I think, and he's like, this is what I think. So on here, I do wanna read one thing, this actually came from Bruce Jenkins, he checked with the city of St. George, and it's from Wes Jenkins, and it says, the city's new legal department has, it's fine, Carrie, this is up.
Mhm.
Okay, it says the city's new legal department has changed the policy and is now requiring all condo, townhome, and multifamily projects to record a final plat prior to releasing the grading or building permits for the project. So in answer to your question, the proposed hotel condo would be required to record a final plat prior to the city issuing the building or grading permit for the project. Because the city now requires these types of projects to record a final plat prior to the release of the grading and building permit, the developer will be required to provide a guaranteed improvement bond prior to the city recording the final plat. Yeah, the city only accepts two types of bonds for a guaranteed improvement bond, a cash bond or a letter of credit. The bond would need to cover everything except the building, i.e. paving, hardscape, landscaping, utilities, and any other proposed site improvement as shown on the approved site construction drawings. The developer will be required to submit a cost breakdown of these site improvements showing each item for which the bond will cover. The quantity of each item, the unit price, the total price, and the total cost of the site improvements. The bond will need to cover 100% of the cost of these items. Staff will need to approve the spreadsheet that covers the cost breakdown for the proposed bond prior to the city accepting the bond. Once the city approves the spreadsheet cost breakdown, the developer will be required to provide the city either a cash bond or a letter of credit in the amount shown on the approved spreadsheet.
That St. George just adopted that portion of it in their grading plan.
And we're already like that.
Well, this is
This
only
is
for
specific for
condos, townhomes, and multifamily.
Our code currently says final site approval or final plat. There's no distinction between a subdivision, there's no distinction between, you know, just saying, or if you're gonna go out and do some big multifamily, if you're gonna do a commercial. Ours is just it's final site, final plat. I don't know, like, I don't know if somebody has input of
Well,
what.
I want to point out too, and Darren can really speak to this so when we're reviewing this, what I want to do is everybody can review this because we're probably going to have a public hearing on this next. So we need to review it and be ready to have the discussion and make a motion whether we think it's good enough. If it's not good enough, then we'll table it. But we need to probably add this verbiage in so we can probably have the lawyers add that in. But the thing that we really need to think about is what happens on mass grading. So mass grading is going to create scars. And you know, when erosion, the reclamation bonds and all these things that are required, they're usually not really that great. So the way it's written now is really you can't do anything until you're like have the full city's approval to go grade these things.
The one thing I am curious about in reading this that Wes doesn't specify is that with some of those reclamation bonds, those are released based on percentage completed, right? Because a developer has two projects going and they can only bond for so much, right? And so developers need bonds released so that they can go start other projects too, right? Like they've got to keep, so the bonding process for developers matters. It matters a lot. What Wes doesn't clarify, he did say they were a cash bond, but he didn't say that they're releasing those based on percentages, complete percentages developed. That's the part I don't know. So whatever you know, I don't know that part.
So the way that Hurricane does it right now, it's more for the total construction than just mass grading. It's more for the total construction. So as a request comes in from the contractor to release some of the money so they can do a pay request, the city has to look at that and say, okay, and they send their inspector out. But these quantities correct, is what the contractor is asking for, is it correct? And then they say, yes, okay, so then the city signs off on that pay request as well as the developer.
And so the thing in this that is proposed in the red line version, so our code currently says final. This one would allow a developer to grade at preliminary. And so.
Is it submitted at preliminary?
It's permitted. It says.
Submitted at preliminary and then
Yeah,
reviewed
it
it?
says right here, in this one, it says, any such permitted use, so it says, I'll just read this paragraph real quick. The general requirement, no person shall commence or perform any grading, excavation, filling or clearing of land without first having obtained a permit from the zoning administrator and ascertaining the existence and location of any underground utilities. No grading permit shall be issued except in connection with a permitted use allowed within the zoning district in which the property that has to be graded, filled, or cleared is located. Any such permitted use that requires a building permit or other approval as provided by this title, such as home construction or a commercial site or subdivision, must obtain either site plan approval or preliminary plat approval as provided under this title before grading permit may be issued. There are some exemptions for obviously agricultural, residential landscaping, non-disturbance of the natural grade, you know, there's that. Or there's also another exemption that is for public facility projects. And then, so, you know, there's gonna be a park, you know, something. Or grading required to construct public facilities, including roadways and utility improvements, approved by the city council. So the bypass, if they're gonna build a road, if they're gonna something, right, they can get started where they need to. And then it talks about in red, in that C, they added that, like the scope of the permit and the approved grading plan. So, like you said, read through it, and it's gonna have some things in there.
This was the code before, right?
They took, this is our current code, red.
Red line code.
Yep, it's our current code, red
So
line.
do we need to get, somebody to draft this portion into it and then email it to us? So we're all reading what the final should be or what?
I think they need to read both. I think they need to read this one that is the red line version, so they know what was started, and then they need to read what the attorneys actually modified and put into the final. They added, this is the red line version from Rick.
Oh, that's from Rick, and
This is the red
then,
line
so they
version
didn't
from
send us a
Rick.
red line?
This one, yeah, well, some of it, yes, and he's, and Bruce's are in here as well.
Okay,
that's
so
what I'm
the,
saying.
the red line
So-
changes encompasses all of it, and then the
Yeah,
other
and
ones,
then they cleaned it up.
that's just the
yes.
draft portion of
Yeah.
it. So, okay, so we can see in the red line everything.
Right,
So
And
what
then
my
you-
question is, do we want to add the stuff that St. George City put in theirs before we really start reviewing this for next month? Should we have,
That's a pretty small paragraph. So we really know what-
or do we want to add it
Yeah.
somewhere?
yeah, that, we need direction on that. I mean, what do you think is the planning commission? I mean,
Well, I think it's great to eliminate some of these smaller projects that are, you know, like the hotels and condos and townhomes and things like, yeah, they should be further down the road before you start grading, because it's not like a massive grading undertaking. Is what I see on them, so.
Yeah, because there are some exclusions in here, like it says, you know, city projects, public facilities. I mean, somebody who's doing their own landscaping, somebody who's not. I don't necessarily think there's,
The real question I have is why on hotels, condos, townhomes? What is the big difference?
well,
I mean,
I'm just from what I would assume, I don't know this to be factual, but what I would assume is because the financing that's associated with some of those projects is typically different. It's not traditional financing.
Yeah.
For example, a
Funding.
hotel is typically only approved by the president of the bank. It's
the
not
funding
just
can
a
fall through
go in and
faster.
Talk to somebody on the side, like we usually have to go through the process, and the final approval for a hotel, for financing for a hotel typically is only done by bank president. So I think a lot of that probably has to do with financing. It's very difficult to get financing for a hotel versus a subdivision. You know, so I think that's probably why they want to make sure not only that they're that far down the road, but that they have financing, is what I would assume. I don't know. Plus the bonding for 100% of a hotel. I mean, that's why I think they're probably.
The difference.
looking at those.
So the way that American does is they don't, they just require you to bond for 100, I think it's 100% or 125% of things that you're working on in the public way. That means in whatever the roadway is. So if you've got encroachments into the road, you've got things such as that, you have to bond for those. If you have improvements, like say tree gutter sidewalk along already dedicated road that you've got to install, those types of things have to be bonded for. So the stuff that you're doing on site, you don't have to bond for. And that's the difference between urban and possibly basic village.
And this one in section D also, the red line, I mean, you can see it, I just like the red line because it's very, you know, easy to see, but in section D, it talks about the grading bond, it says here, you know, review and grading permit, the zoning administrator, may require the applicant permitting post grading bond if none of the following instances are present. And then it says, you know, if it's gonna be, it talks about hillside, it talks about on-site grading, that might affect, you know, if your property line's adjacent to another. So there are also, you know, some things about the bond in here that are super important. So anyway, yeah, just some stuff if you want to read through that. I just mainly wanted to make sure that it was referred for discussion and that we had that information from the city of St. George. And, you know, get some direction.
Do you, if you guys can either add that verbiage to it, or if we need to have the lawyers add it to it and then just email it out to us, and then maybe we can individually respond. Don't respond as a group. We'll just, you know, individually respond to whether we think it's a good enough draft form to get the public hearing for next month. Sound simple?
Yeah.
So you guys
I think
will
I'd probably prefer to just email Bruce and just ask him
to do it.
maybe put that in there and then he can run it by Keith. So that he can check that out too, because again, this isn't just specific to Firelight, just because they're moving, this is specific to everybody.
There,
who wants
there's
to do it.
there's another reason this needs to move faster is because some of the bypass tailings need to go somewhere. So, we don't want to break our own code. So if you'll take care of that and then just email it out to us in just email us the red line version.
Okay.
And then if everybody likes it, then we can just post the draft version for the public hearing.
Just email this red line one right from the SharePoint, this exactly.
No, the
Or
updated,
other as
as soon as Bruce and Heath are done looking at it
When Bruce and Heath finish.
Then are you looking for your public hearing
next.
in April?
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions on that? Everybody know what I need? Oh, here we go.
Well, I-
No, I don't.
Let's hear
I
them.
have a question, because the RV park, they've been moving stuff around over there. But they weren't moving dirt necessarily, we're just clearing.
Grubbing, but they were asked to stop.
Okay.
That's why this
That-
whole thing is coming out. But they did, but also with that, we do need to say that they actually did, we did not have a planning and zoning administrator, and it wasn't being administrated by our building. So it is important to note that they did come in and actually get a grading permit. They actually did get a grading permit, but it just didn't follow the process. So as soon as we were like, whoa, we have to actually have a process, we asked them to stop, and they did.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
And
'cause
it
when-
hadn't reached
As
final.
we started talking about this, I'm going,
Wait.
RV park's been, yeah, okay.
Yeah, same,
All right.
yeah. So as we started looking into this, that's kind of where like, we've got to find
So
a
brought
way
it up.
to do that. Yeah, we've got to find a way that when the developers move dirt, then we also need to protect the city, right? And make sure
Right.
we don't just start and move, so.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of why we're having this whole discussion.
Okay.
But,
So we'll wait for an email back from you or whoever with the,
yeah, as soon as
with
we
the
see
newer,
that from Bruce, I'll
the newer
ask Bruce
guideline.
to have this, but,
okay.
and then, or Keith, either one, it might come from Keith.
And if you guys are doing your research and you see something that's completely out of line, then, or something that's just not gonna happen, then just email it to me directly.
Yeah, I actually, it's probably gonna come from Keith. I don't know how he and Bruce are working. I don't know if Keith did the final review of this.
Okay.
I'm assuming it will come from Keith.
Any other questions on mass grading? I know you got one.
No, I don't.
No? Oh, okay.
No. What little bit of thought is, are we gonna be able to meet their timeline?
If we do, we do.
I
If not,
guess
then
that's
it's-
how it works.
Yeah. If not, there's penalties.
Yeah.
Got a lot of questions on that, because we're not part of the second, it's not on the meeting, so we'll see what happens next month.
After next week, I think that once you're, don't quote me on this, once you're approved by the city council, I think you should see a draft of it too.
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, as an alternate, we just go up.
So on the next meeting and then especially on the
Discussion as an alternate, if you go.
what I've been doing, and so once you're approved as alternate and you're sworn in, then especially on discussion items, you guys, I want as much comment back as possible, because the more people that are doing this, the better. And even on some of the other items, the only thing you guys aren't going to do as alternates is vote.
I didn't know there was a fight, so. Sorry.
There's no one here.
That's all right. right? There's- Yes, you are
Yeah.
right.
What do you,
You know how many times I've been reprimanded for opening my mouth?
I don't know.
Oh,
But
boy.
it is
would you
important to
reprimand
get
him for
feedback.
opening his mouth now? I would love to hear what he has to say.
Huh?
I would
Oh.
love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, do you want to
What do you have to say?
jump in? Let's get it because well, like I said, if we want to clear something up, and I mean, I'm more than willing to hear some stuff too, because we're going to be voting on it probably next month.
Mass grading is the worst thing that can happen to you. If them guys squat on you and don't do it, you didn't get a bond, or you didn't catch a bond on them guys up there, just, you got a mess. You got a real mess, it never goes away. Or you don't catch a bond on a simple motel, and you go do funky, can't finish it, you're stuck with it. And that's, a bond, even on mass grading, is the most important thing the city has for insurance, is bond.
It's the only thing.
And you're right, your range for mass grading is $25. It's ridiculous. You know, typically it's $1,000 if you want to break over 500 yards, you know. You might want to look at that. I don't know about the graduated scale, but sometimes it's a little higher up front. And that's-
Are we implementing the calculation fee that,
So the calculation is gonna be part of the uniform fee schedule, regardless, they already agreed to that calculation, outside of if nothing changes on this, regardless of if the ordinance
oh, the
changes.
city council already
City
agreed to
council's
that?
already adopted
So we've already
the
adopted the new
99
fee
cents.
schedule. It's not $25 anymore.
It changed.
Is the calculation figured by an engineer or your gov?
Engineer.
Engineer.
You have an engineer.
The engineer has to tell us the tonnage, and that's part of their legend. It has to be the tonnage. And then, or cubic yard, sorry, tonnage, everything's gonna weigh different, but, and then the equation goes off that, right? So,
Yeah, so city council has already agreed to the uniform fee schedule, so we are gonna do at least the right calculations. So now it's figured according to calculation.
If you keep.
Regardless of if you change nothing on your ordinance, the main thing you're looking at on your ordinance is, do you want to allow them to grade up preliminary, right? Like he's saying, mass grading is on very, very front end, there's,
that's why I said that, you know, like right now in Hurricane City, it doesn't allow it at all either. So it's just not happening.
Well, they do allow it, but it's a special exception.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of.
Most cities do allow it with this thing, and it's actually a pretty big revenue source for the city. I mean, the city can actually create and generate a lot of money from it.
So just, and I haven't seen this document, but all the bonding language is in this document, right?
Yeah.
We'll be able to
Darren,
read what
so-
percentages they need.
So the zoning administrator would actually be the one that administers this. So like the process would be, it would come here, planning commission would approve a preliminary plat if it meets all the other requirements. And it's basically, they'll submit another plan that's a little bit more detailed than that and to the zoning administrator, then he'll go through and check every one of the boxes, which,
Mhm.
I mean, as for the bonding and the SWIP is
And that'll
required,
determine
I
the
mean, I
bonding
don't,
requirements.
And know that it's not just me. It would be me plus I would make sure that the city engineer.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The ci-
yeah.
The city engineer is gonna receive this document at the same time he does the preliminary plat.
There's checks and balances throughout the whole process.
And that's why there are the two different calculations. The one is the review fee, right? Because it's planning and zoning administrator, but then those engineered plans are also double checked by the city engineer. The thing to keep in mind is that as a project moves forward, grading will happen regardless, right? And a bond, if it's construction, a bond will happen regardless. What you're talking about is the timing of that.
Mhm.
And so the mass grading on the front end gets a little bit sketchy because there's no guarantee that they even have a preliminary plat, right? There's no guarantee that that preliminary plat is gonna move to construction drawings. There's no guarantee they're gonna get a final plat. And so at every stage of that, but if somebody gets construction and they wanna build out west, right, they wanna build subdivision, and they go all the way through that process and get their construction plans and their final plat, like at construction plans, they have to bond it then anyway.
Mhm.
So the bond will happen, but it's different and it's later in the game when funding is more in place and things. The sooner you let someone, I mean, in all transparency, the sooner you let someone grade the more risky it is, right? That the financing will maybe not go through, there will be a recession, right? So that's why in this, I mean, if you're gonna make a recommendation to change your grading ordinance to anything, even preliminary, right? Like you've gotta be sure that you know what that you're very comfortable with what it is you're changing it to.
And
Right.
the bonding and the
And
bonding
bonding.
Right,
requirements.
that's what point that
Yeah.
bonding is
So
required.
then it would be
Because
required
right
way
now,
sooner.
this is probably, Tokerville's grading ordinance is probably the tightest one in the county. I mean, it's super tight. So, I mean, like he said, there's even exceptions in Hurricane very, I mean, they're very tight, like you basically know if you're gonna do it in Hurricane, you need final. But there is maybe one exception here, there, this or that. Tokerville is, no, that's it. That's,
It's usually only just on the phase that they're approving.
yeah.
It's not, that's grading on multiple phases.
Yeah, so
it's
is there
important
something that we
you-
do need to put in there? So like that brings up the good thing. So they've got a preliminary plat for 1 and 2, but they want to put refuge on, or whatever it is, it doesn't, or on 6.
And then that's
So
covered
how
in
do
there.
we-
It
that
talks
is?
about the receiving parcel, and it talks about,
Okay.
whoever, it talks about cut out,
Okay.
it talks about bar areas, it talks about,
I'll read it.
yeah, it talks about,
This just
The
came out
receiving
at 3
parcel.
o'clock today, so I didn't see it either.
yeah, it came out very, very late today, so.
Wayne, you got more?
So regardless of where they decide to put it, it's still.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, yeah, your project is required on the bottom, a lot of cities require 125% for a bond, not just 100%. Because by the time, if you let them grade at the front end, by the time they go through, if let's say a project failed, and you have the actual.
Yeah, I understand,
Prices have
and maybe
gone
I
up, so
kind of lost my
125
question here,
kind
but
of
are we gonna
protection.
amend
Right.
the residential
But the main thing
nightly
with
rental?
grading is that not all
We
buildings are.
we only have
created equal.
just the nightly rental code. It's not
Right.
residential. It's
Well, yeah,
or
I'm
commercial.
sorry, that's, yeah. So are we gonna just put an exception on that, or are we going to
Right now
write up
is 100%.
something different in the MPDO, or what's that?
No, we don't want to touch the NPDO.
Okay.
We don't
So
want to, we don't want to go in
we're
there.
looking for an exception
We're going to do an
on,
exception. in there.
or an exception.
Okay, so are we done with mass grading for the second time? Yeah, we can go third.
There's a lot there, so.
The one thing I want to tell you that when the document comes out and you have access to it, do not share that with anybody, please.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that out loud. Okay, so that takes us out of the discussion items, the calendar of events. Next week on March 16th, the OPMA training at the city council business meeting. So the planning commission is required to go to this meeting next week, so at city council, and I'm actually going to be out of town. So I'm going to zoom in to watch it and hopefully. So this is a meeting that we're required to go to every single year for that training.
At 6 PM also.
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
And, open public meeting act,
And we're also, I'm just gonna say real quick on that, it's gonna be done by Attorney Snow, and it'll be in this room, it'll be the last hour of city council. And it's super important that you attend because it teaches you what you can say in public meetings, what you can't say in public meetings, and all of that. It's an open public meeting training. It goes through all of it. And he's also gonna review the Municipal Ethics Act, what the county can't do as representatives of the city. And so he's going to do both of those trainings. So, that's the last hour of city council. So,
So we need to be here at 6. That's city council meeting.
You don't have to be right here at 6. You can come a little later if you want. If you
Or a
just
little
need to be
later.
here for that last hour of the
okay,
meeting.
yeah, the last hour, but I haven't seen the agenda to know if it's a really long one or a short one. I don't know. So, but yeah, city council starts at 6. And he runs the last hour. Yeah, he does.
Then the next thing is the spring social, March 23rd, the Center Street Park, Miss Tokerville, March 26th, Easter egg hunt in April. So that's, are they having like the pageant, Miss Tokerville, March 26th
Yeah,
or something?
This Tokerville pageant's March 26th, and
Gotcha.
we're gonna have a community-wide Easter egg hunt at the Center Street Park in April.
Okay,
So,
okay,
Is the Center Street?
yeah. If anybody else doesn't have anything, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 We're officially adjourned at 7:40.